Then one more thing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I note, like in the States, because of the Constitution, they make provisions for nationality. But in Canada, how does that work in terms of being separated? Because you only have two. You have, like for us, and the native. So
you are a native. You are a native. What you got to understand, it's funny, just quickly, right? I was up, I drive, right? So I went up north, right? And I saw some natives up there, and they're you know, right now they're doing, what do you call it, Island No More, right? So I confronted them. The question I asked them, I said, do you recognize the so-called black people here as natives on this land? He said, yeah, of course. I said, they said, they're in my family. The only people that don't know is us.
What's up?
That's the only people that don't know. We're in the Aquarian age. Now we gotta know. Peace.
And also too, Tuesday's class, we're going to be dealing with the whole I don't know more, whatever. And how come Moors aren't down with that nonsense there? Right? Going out and protesting and stuff like that. This is from December 27th, 1928. And this was a letter written by Noble Joali to Brother Lomax Bey. Dear brother, be very careful of propaganda and news that you hear. There is a certain movement from the churches to destroy our movement and dishonor me, and that have men paid, both Europeans and Asiatics. And any outside letter that you receive, let me know. Let me know the message, then I will know that you are a Moor, and I favor Moors. We Moors must stand in unity. We stand together in according to the deeds and actions, not by words of lips. This letter is to be read to the temple. The 8th of January is my birthday. This will be your Christmas. And all presents are to be sent on that day, and I look for all faithful Moors to send me a present on that day, no matter how small or large. Let it be finance or domestic. It is a law of Allah and not mine, as I am only his son, one of his sons. We are under the crescent and the star, the same as other prophets have been, and the world is under the same. Love to all. Peace, Noble Joali. So January 8th was Noble Joali's birthday, and the Canaanland Moor celebration for the past 3 years has been just to acknowledge the Prophet, recognize who he is, and continue to do the uplifting work that he's ordered us to do, or charged us to do, in order to change the conditions of our people out there. So with that, we're going to make this call and get this lecture started. Thank you for your time, and again, we're going to send down the food orders and all that stuff, so people could let us know what they want, and we'll have somebody bring it down, or we'll let people go up in little groups to go get their food. All right. Islam.
Islam. Islam.
Islam. Islam.
Islam.
Islam. Can you hear us?
Greetings, family. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you.
Are we good?
Can you see us all right?
Yes.
All right, peace.
Peace.
And love.
And love.
Peace and
Forevermore.
Forevermore.
No.
Are you ready?
Yes, we're ready.
Yo,
If your camera can focus a little better, other than that, it's pretty good.
Yeah. I got you. I got to turn it. Yes, of course.
Yeah, like, don't mess with it.
There we go.
Like that?
There you
That's
go.
perfect.
Okay. We forgot. All right, now, y'all are in the dark over there, huh? But I can understand that. Y'all in the dark because we can't really see.
That's all right. That's all right.
Yeah.
That's good.
You can turn on the back, the upstairs light.
Yeah, the upstairs.
They can-
No, you don't have to. You don't have to. We can feel you and we just wanted to make sure it was all right. Y'all are all still there.
Yeah.
So you don't have to cut it on if you don't want to
Yeah.
because whatever's comfortable
It's all
for
good.
Yeah,
you.
leave it on, leave it on. Yeah, we're good. We're good.
All right. All right. I was thinking that I would, just inject, the interest of, or the important activity of the woman first and get that kind of out of the way because the lessons regarding that are multiple and the sisters need to, I trust will, if they're not already studying that and getting that, that they will, and that there will be sisters classes such as it was established with Prophet Moorish Temple that you would have a women's auxiliary. Do you have a women's auxiliary? Or you're gonna get that going on, right?
Yeah.
Did I hear someone say yes?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
All right.
So, since this is in honor of Prophet Moorish Temple, 100 years later, and I know that Taj has some very interesting stuff to share with that. We also want to bring up the sisters because we know that for the most part, the entire movement hasn't been addressed as it was intended to be. So certainly, as well, neither have the Moabite mother of civilization been addressed in it, because the main reason why the whole movement hasn't been addressed is because of the suppression or with the Inquisition and the suppressing of what they think is religion, and with that, that suppression, as we call quote unquote religion, is absolutely the suppression of the woman. So it's important because the truth is that we're not going to get as far as we need to be or where we need to be, whether we realize it or not, until we recognize that this is the Moabite nation. And it's not separate from the Moorish nation at all, because the Moorish nation is just the designation, and as has been referred to often, once she fell asleep and she gave her womb, representative of that fez, which represents the womb, in which the brothers wear, pass it on because she's unconscious. And I know everyone has seen the picture, or the depiction, illustration, on the cover of the 101s, and on that cover it shows her unconscious, and on her womb it says humanity, because humanity is she. And so if anybody out there is helping to uplift fallen humanity, they're uplifting her, because she is humanity. So with that, it says that the great meeting is on, and he specifically put it on that cover. The great meeting is on when what? When she wakes up. Now, some of the other things with that is a sister reading, because it deals with our psychological, emotional condition, position, and the mistakes made, or the misconception, I guess is the right word, misconception about what it means when we say that, when we talk about it, even when we just talk about this, because of the misconceptions that have been already bestowed upon society as a whole, really, in regards to the woman. Because of that, as soon as you start talking like this, the first thing that the sons think is that you're man bashing, and that's not it at all, because you are man, and they are the son of man. And the son of man is a noble title. It is a noble position. Matter of fact, all you sons in there, you are absolutely the miracle son. That's the secret, that's the thing that they don't tell you. You are the miracle son that is spoken of. You are that. That is a wonderful, wonderful position that we cherish, not bash, cherish in the right position, in the right conditions. And so with that, I said that to say that when you hear the sisters start talking about this, and remember, when we talk about these things, any of the stuff that we're discussing, any of the nationality and birth rights principles, people are having what's called exorcisms first. And that's to get out the old stuff, and then they can receive the baptism in the waters, which is why all of your religious institutions say we're going to baptize you in the water. Well, that water is really the waters in the womb, of which the beings who come here, and the saints that are going to come marching in, are those who come through the womb. And the waters are baptizing them while you are creating the temple, the body, in your womb. So the children are to come out knowing these things already. Why? Because you know it. The child knows what you know. So with that, when we start talking about this, the first thing that you kind of see really is the exorcism and the fear that, oh my goodness, she's cutting our head off already, some of you sons say, because the wrath of Allah is she's cutting our head off, and she's not even awake. What's going to happen when she becomes awake? Oh boy, we're going to be in trouble. That's what you think, because you've been misguided, misled, miseducated into the truth of these things. So I said all that to try to put an edge on receiving the information, right? Did somebody say Islam?
Islam.
I thought I heard that. I said all that to take the edge off of that craziness, that European feudal frame of mind about women's lib and bashing men. Let's erase that. Let's have the exorcism and get that out of the way, because your true savior is your mother, and she created you. Who created you? Allah. That's Islam. And so now the other thing is related to the works of Prophet Noble Jubilee, because the important thing about sharing this information today is to relate it to, or to show the correlation, which is clear, if you have the right concepts. Now, if you don't have the right concepts, you can read all of the works of the Prophet, and we can give you the right answer, and you still wouldn't have it right, because why? The concept is wrong. So that's what we've been experiencing. And let me just say this, I'll give you another example of that. A great example of that is, like, for instance, Prophet Noble Jubilee said, or even to do, if you don't do anything else, to declare your nationality, right? That's all, that's what he said. Now, declaring your nationality is a statement that can be made right now as you're sitting there looking at another declare your nationality. It's not necessarily the publication of anything. So declaring your nationality means you declared your nationality as a Moor, and then you must start being who you are, right? So what people have been doing is proclaiming it, because proclaiming it is to publish it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you really declared it. You just simply put it in running it. But you didn't declare it yourself within yourself, so there are a lot of people who declared it, but they're not, who proclaimed it, they haven't declared it within themselves. Because one of the ways that he started uplifting and following humanity is teaching people what? I think that's number 16, to be themselves, which is appropriate for sign when you take it to the law. And remember that it is not, his work is not for interpretation. The law is not for interpretation. So when someone says about this is how I interpret it, it's not for interpretation. It is what it is. You have to apply the truth and the information to the different, whatever you do. If you're dealing with law, well, of course, we are law. We are the law. We are all law manifested in the flesh is Allah, arm, leg, arm, head. So with that, you know that And again, I'm going to go back to the things that Prophet Deuteronomy put forth when we deal with the prayer. Now the prayer, right, it says Allah. You know who Allah is, right? There's she, right? However, she is both male and female, masculine and feminine, right? Yin and yang. That's who Allah is, mother and father. So Allah, Father of the universe. Many times people come to class and say, well, why are you saying this about the woman and then you say father? You're misunderstanding what father is. One, she is both. That's verse number one, because Allah is both. And two, father, if you look at the word, is pater. You know, pater. Father, pater, which is paternity, which is what? The process of creation. Who said that it was the male specimen? Because it's not.
Pastor.
All right? So Allah, comma, Father of the universe. What you're saying is Allah, her, she, the universe. Got it?
Got it.
All right, I mean, Islam on that, Islam.
Nah.
So now I want to do this and shorten this up a little bit because I want to take for the sisters especially when we deal with, as I said, you are, Allah is you. The 5 points on leg on head, the 5-pointed star, symbol of cosmos, the law, divine law into manifestation. And so you're dealing with cosmology. So where you are, sisters, when you are carrying or building the temple, which is the body, what you eat, what you smell, what you do, everything that you do is creating Solomon's temple, or the soul of man's temple. And this is why it's so important that we get this so that we can know what we're bringing in, because as you probably already know, the Ark of the Covenant, well, the covenant is an agreement, and that agreement is to bring in the ancestors and the souls of the saints, to bring them in, because all of us are nothing but ancestors returned. So that comes from the womb. So the Ark of the Covenant is the Ark created in the womb. All right, that Ark created, of the womb of any woman, no matter what her size is, how small, tall, wide, whatever, she creates a perfect geometrical ark. And that's the Ark of the Covenant, and that's what the covenant is, the agreement to bring them back. So you look at chapter 27, the home instructions for the children. Can you see that? 25, I'm sorry, apologize, 25. Can you see that? Because I'm going to show you where, not only in his statement of religious controversy where he's telling you the sun is at high noon, but they comprehend it not. When he's talking about religion, because religion is cosmology, is law, order, and governing principles, and so people comprehend it not. Not only is it there for you to review at your time, but it is also here, and I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to yield the floor. We're always sharing glasses, y'all know this. All right. Chapter 25. I mean, not 25. No, 25 is,
The Holy Covenant.
no, not the Holy Covenant. I'm talking about instructions for the children.
23.
Yeah, 23. Only instructions for the children. Somebody show you something. Matter of fact, I'm just going to read this because this is parenting, mothering, the whole thing. It says to you, parents, consider thou art a parent, the importance of thy trust, the being thou hast produced. It is thy duty to support. Upon thee also it dependeth whether the child of the bosom be a blessing or a curse to thyself, a useful or a worthless member of the community, or to the community. Because remember, sisters, you create beings. They go into society to govern self and society. And that's what you do. And that is the most important thing to do, is home. You are You are a child, you run your home, there's no, I hear men say, oh, I run the home. No, they don't. They provide for it. You run the home. And what comes out of the home is most important. That's why a husband comes from, etymologically, house binder, husband. So he binds the house, but you run the house. So the important thing, and I'm going to read number 2 then. Upon thee also it depended whether the child of thy bosom be a blessing or a curse to thyself, or a useful or worthless member to the community. Prepare him early with instruction, and season his mind with the maxims of truth. Watch the bent of his inclination, set him right in his youth, and let no evil habit gain strength with his years. So shall he rise like a cedar on the mountains. His head shall be seen above the trees of the forest. A wicked son is a reproach to his father, but he that doth right is an honor to his right hands. The soil was thine own, let it not want cultivation. The seed which thou sowest, that also shall thou reap. So I have been jumped here. When we talk about what's wrong with the young people, there's nothing wrong with them. You gotta ask yourself what's wrong with them either. Because they are a product, and as a result of you building them in home and then raising them thereafter. And so at the age of maybe 7, needs to begin cleaving to his father. And one of the things is why we must, stay in our own jurisdiction is that they've got this child support situation, and they got like 15-year-old, 16-year-old boys. They've got young sons. They got signed up. You talk about being fathers, and they got them running, walking down the street or pushing a baby carriage. Now they don't. That's not for them to be doing. Not that they can't push it, but trying to take care of the child. No, the child is to be with the mama, at least until the cycle of 7, in harmony with the range, which is change of bone structures, teeth, all that. They're not supposed. That's not supposed to be going down. That is just not our culture. It doesn't work like that. So we got to get ourselves out of these subcultures. So 6, a wicked 7. I read 7. The soil was thine own, let it not want cultivation. The seed which thou sowest, thou also shalt thou reap. So you will reap. Just as in astrology, when the first 6 houses are personal houses, personal independence, personal subjectives, meaning what is this child is born, what is that child subjected to. Once you get to the 7th house, that's the first social house. Your child is going out into society with what his mother taught him in the first 6 seasons of life, as we'll call it, to go into society and present himself or herself into society. What you need, that's what they always say, didn't your mama teach you anything? They always say that, because that's what's going down. So in the 7th house, that's the first social house, and here comes the child, here comes the debutante, being presented into society, because that whole thing is not from them, but from our culture, which they have adjusted or whatever. That's what it's about. So now, this is where it begins to, Prophet literally begins to connect you with the astrology energies that we call astrology signs, which are all the attributes of humanity that can exist with a mixture of how that would happen depending on where the moon was when the child, I wouldn't say when the child was born, but actually the moon, the child, is determined at conception. When you conceive that child, the moment you conceive them, where the moon was, that's when that child, that's when that child will be born, and that's when that child will pass on, because nothing falls far from its origins. So, it says, and this is for Aries, teach him obedience. Right? Aries says that wild energy going out there, just bang, ramming through walls. Teach him obedience, and he shall bless thee. This is the child now. Teach him obedience. Teach him modesty, Tauruses, and he shall not be ashamed. You know, Tauruses look out what they look like, you know, all the material things, so they must learn some modesty. Teach him gratitude, Geminis, and he shall receive benefits. Teach him charity. Oh, you know that's Cancer. It's the house of the mother, charity, right? Charity begins at what? Home. What is Cancer's home? A house, the fourth house of what? Home. And he shall gain love. Now, teach him temperance, and he shall have health. Now, I just want you to know that there was a typo. Yeah, that's right. There can be typos. And you know, astrology, you know. I reversed it, and I got all kinds of, like, why did I do it? Because I know astrology, these two were reversed, the Virgo and the Leo. It's real clear that health is the house that belongs to Virgo. So, teach him temperance, and he shall have health. Teach him prudence, and fortune shall attend him, which is the sun and the gold, and that would belong to Leo. And right here you are written out. I'm sorry, what I just read is reversed, so let me read it proper, because it didn't reverse, because it's teaching prudence and fortune shall enter his Leo, and then teaching temperance, and he shall have health is absolutely Virgo, the house of health, ruling the house of health. That's what Virgo rules. So number 10 in chapter 23, all the instructions for thy children will be for you to read and realize that those two ought to be reversed. All right? And now the prophet wasn't wrong, but somebody just made a typo. It happens all the time, I guess. Now, teach him, and this is how you know. Teach him justice. You know that's Libra, the seventh sign. Teach him justice, and he shall be honored by the world. Teach him sincerity. Scorpions, some of you already know what's coming next. Scorpions, teach him sincerity, and his own heart shall not reproach him. And the Scorpions, they're always trying to, get someone back, and, retribution, regeneration, but, they like to, pay someone back for what they do, so they caught in there. Let it go. The avenging angels, if someone does you wrong, let it go. The avenging angels will come and get them in the difference of degrees. They'll come quickly with what they used to come, because, the vibrations moving faster. Do not get in the way, trying to make it right, or else you're going to get zapped too. And that's what happens if you find yourself in a perpetual cycle of, constantly going back and forth, and not moving forward in your lessons. Teach him, this is for Sagittarius, teach him diligence, and his wealth shall increase. Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter, that actually expands all gifts, fortunes, etc., like that. Teach him benevolence, and his mind shall be exalted. Capricorns, which is what the prophet was, a Capricorn. All right? And then after Capricorn, we have what? We have Aquarius. We're in the age of Aquarius. Teach him science. Science, which is sense, common sense, science. And his life, or conscience, Conscience, with science, which is where we are in the age of Aquarius, means with sense, with common sense. Teach him science, and his life shall be useful. And last but not least, Pisces, you can remember, you seek yourself. So we start off with Aries, and when we get to Pisces, you no longer seek yourself, because you have found yourself within yourself. And it says, teach him religion. And you know what religion really is. We're dealing with it. And his death, because we're all going to pass form in his physical body. We know that our everlasting life is not in its physical form. We know this for a fact. I don't care what religious sect, denomination. They all tell you have everlasting life. And you know it's not in this physical form, because we don't die. The spirit is not only the flesh. Man is the spirit of flesh. So Pisces, you teach him religion, and his death shall be happy. Now that sounds strange, but that's how that goes. And I will say this, we are now in the age of Aquarius. Many people say, is it here? Is it whatever? It's here, and it's about consciousness, knowledge being increased. Many shall go to and fro in the earth, and knowledge shall increase, or seeking knowledge, and knowledge shall increase. And with that, we go back to the baptizing waters, which Aquarius is not a water sign. Some people think it is. It is an air sign for communications. And right now, what's been communicated and shared is information. And this is why we have the ad saying this is the age of information, because it's the age of Aquarius. So again, if you don't have the right concept, it doesn't matter what it tells you, so you have to study, all right? Now, Aquarius is here because there's no time for cycles. Because the ruler of Aquarius is Uranus, and Saturn is the co-ruler. If you do any studies, you will find that they used to say that Saturn was the ruler of Aquarius, but it's not. It's the co-ruler. That was before the Europeans actually found out that Pluto exists and some other things, and they still don't know because they don't know law and they will not know what to do when it don't fit. But we will trust you. So. Saturn and Uranus has come in on the same path. It's kind of coming together. And they're bringing in the age of Aquarius, meaning that Saturn or Uranus goes on its side, it governs electricity, causing a lot of the earthquakes. As the prophet said, if you don't follow, the earthquakes will come. Right? Okay. Now, or refrain from sinful ways. Sin is not known as well. That's a sin to not know. But you must know. Knowledge means know the legend, knowledge. And that is that which has been written, or is written, or will be written. So they're coming in, and Uranus is knocking down all the institutions that are not founded in the 5 principles that we've taught, now truth, peace, freedom, and justice. And then Saturn is like, okay, all right, we're not going to let it come, we ain't letting it build it back up without some order and discipline. So a lot of the institutions that you see, churches, schools, corporations, they're all falling. All falling. And nobody, not me, not you, no one is going to be able to erect anything that's going to stand unless it is built on the foundation of love. Y'all say it with me now. Love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice.
Wow.
And we know that that's what the prophet said, and we attach it to the 5-point star. The 5-point star is you are arm, leg on head, you are the law. So Aquarius has brought it in for information. It's about the exorcism. And I'll say this, when you talk to some of the people who are trying to impart this to the ignorant for their improvement, they may want to have an exorcism while you're standing there. They may throw up on you. You know that green piece in the head of the movie, The Exorcism, a long time ago? And they threw up during the exorcism. You need to back off a little bit, so you gotta hit it, and don't worry about it, you're spreading the word, truth. And they may want to throw up on you, so you gotta step off a minute until they get straight. Now they're ready for you to pour that water in, if they want it, because the teacher appears when the student is ready. Because you are the student, and you are the teacher. All right? I think I've covered just about everything that, I know that myself and Sister Anna as well, we need to get, and we say this, but we need to kind of get together and maybe do a Skype lesson for my sisters. So I think we said this before, but things started moving because Aquarius and Uranus and Saturn came in and they started knocking down everything. People, everybody just got cooked away. Lastly, I want to say this, because this is what I realized. All my life, in your life, I'm sure you've heard people say that the dead was going to rise from the graves, right? Remember that in the Bible, when they were in the text that the dead will arise from the grave, will rise again? Do you remember hearing that?
Yes.
Okay. I know you already know this, but it's really so clear because this is what's happening right now as we speak. As a little girl, when I used to hear that, it was an awful thing to think about. I actually thought that people were going to come out from their graves, you know. Yeah, I did. Like, you know, they're going to come from their graves, ooh. But it actually means what's happening now in the age of Aquarius. And in this electrifying age of information, as the Prophet already said, which is the age of Aquarius, and this new age of information. And that is the dead in consciousness will be rising. And that is what we're experiencing now. Am I right, Atisa? It's happening, isn't it?
It's happening.
So that's what that is. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I look forward to setting up something where we mothers of civilization can talk and get straight on what's going on today, especially with our sons and with our European daughters, so we can not have no racist thing about European daughters. We gotta really understand who we are and what's going on. Everybody all the lands wants to live, so we just gotta put it in place. So with that, peace and love.
Peace.
Peace.
Round of applause, please.
And I bring you for the cards to read back. Yes.
Let's talk about this 100-year cycle. It's interesting. One of the things that I want to mention, in harmony with what Sister Roz was speaking of, which you all know, on the cover of your questionnaire, where the prophet has woman unconscious, and there's 9 drops of water coming off her body, and yet on her womb is written the word humanity. That is key because it can be equated with the principle of application that the high priest sorcerers use systematically to remove Bayit from the Kabbalistic alphabet, from the Hebrew alphabet, for the purpose of setting up the conditions for the Pope and the bishopric to rule the planet. And therefore, as people begin to study the books, the old books, the old scripts, the old literature, the old culture, they must be aware that the priesthood, the dark side of the priesthood, removed the letter and the character teachings of Bayit, which is also referred to as Beth, which is the second letter of the Kabbalistic alphabet, which is referred to also as the Hebrew alphabet. And that principle is symbolized also on the cover of the 101 questionnaire with the woman being unconscious. And so it is representative of the nature of taking the feminine principle out of philosophy and out of the metaphysical teachings of true religion. And when people begin to study ancient culture and religion and approach it just from the carnalistic masculine principle as set up by the popes of Rome and other disingenuous persons, their concepts will come out imbalanced and absolutely incorrect. Because all true religion is based on the mother-father principle, i.e., or what is known as Aleph Bet. Now, in the Kabbalistic Aleph Bet energy, the letter Aleph is the only letter in the Aleph Bet that expresses not a sound of its own, but yet it is the source that gives power and energy to all the rest. And thus, that is the principle on which the masculine energy is expressed through the letter Aleph, and is expressed or comes to life, giving life, expressed in life as the breath through the womb of Bayit, or what you call the house of God, which is the second letter of the Kabbalistic alphabet, which is the feminine principle, and it is upon this principle that you get the symbols of yin and yang, or the mother, father, son principle, or the divinity principle, the creation of the offspring, and this is where you get mother, father, son, and that has also been corrupted by the priesthood saying the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, which in its original form is mother, father, son. So that must be understood and that must be comprehended by all adepts when they're looking at the cover of the questionnaire, because that is a key, a graphic key for redemption, having that comprehension and understanding. And of course, since all life comes through woman, comes through the womb, it is most important for people to go back into the principles of the mother-father principle when reading all ancient scripture to bring balance back. And therefore, as the woman becomes conscious, so will humanity be redeemed. And this is another code, reason why in the graphics, humanity is written on her womb. I just wanted to bring that to your attention, although most of you who are adepts already know that. I know that some people are not aware of that because some adepts will not tell that part of the lessons that they themselves have and should have been delivering to Moors, and they have not done so. So just in case, I'm making sure that is known by all the listeners so that you can become what you should have been 100 years ago, and that is pretty much proficient in this information and science, i.e. adeptus or emeritus. And that's where those titles come from. So I just wanted to show that, speak that as an interjection. Also, for those who have limited information, those who have been cribbed by the dark priest in the church, you will find the Kabbalistic alphabet in the book of Psalms, starting with Psalm 119, and so you can write that down. So that's for those who would try to deny that, and that is a necessary instruction for all to even understand how to read those books. And so when you read those books and then you go into the Zohar, you'll also understand the Quran even better. The Quran from the holy city Mecca, Muhammad Ali edition, or the Mulana Ali edition too, you would understand them better because they're all Kabbalistic. The unfortunate situation that we have on the planet is that the priesthood, the imams, the rabbis, the grand sheikhs, etc., and those who have been in positions of power over the lives of people have known these things and have held them back and have not been telling the people. Therefore, when the people go into the literature, their concepts are usually wrong. And this is again why Noble Drawley says, relative to the Historical 7, why he tailored that book particularly for us to bring us out of darkness into marvelous light. But again, let's talk about this 100-year cycle. Now, the Prophet Noble Drawley set up the old Canaanite temple in 1913, actually 1912, but it was solidified, or what you call set in an operative order in 1913. And its purpose is for the uplifting of fallen humanity, and logically for the return of the birthright of the direct descendants of the world's largest and oldest estate, i.e. the descendants of the ancient Canaanite Moabites, i.e. the descendants the Moroccans, Al-Moroccans, Americans, etc., the direct descendants of the ancient ones. And of course, knowing world history, as time passed with us having become corrupted by our own misgivings and violating the principles of our ancient mothers and fathers, our estate fell into the hands of the bishoprics of Rome. And coming more to contemporary times and modern times, as you would say, to understand the politics of the world, of the contemporary world, one must know of the Spanish Inquisition was set in order primarily by the popes of Rome, but one of the primal popes upon which these operations were expanded is Pope Innocent III with his Inquisitor General Thomas de Torquemada. And that is the foundation of the modern world's politics across the planet. And the agreement of the bishoprics with different heads of states and princes of the planet with the execution of those determinations made by the popes of Rome. This would include the later bullas that have been ruling the world, and one of the most well-known later bullas from the church is the Pontifex of 1492 and Intercatera Divina of 1493. And these are fundamentally the foundation for the drafting up of rulings, ordinances, and statutes by your corporate entities operating under European British rulership for world conquest in concert with Opus Dei and the Jesuit order. And this would be known as the Secret Treaty of Verona of 1213 AD between King John of England and the popes of Rome. And of course, in reflective harmony with that, bringing up to more contemporary times, you must know, and we must know, the relationship to that activity with a member of the order who is known as Woodrow Wilson, who was the praetor who was operating at the time when Prophet Noble set up the old Canaanland Temple. Woodrow Wilson was president for the United States Corporation. And in 1913, this is when he met with representatives of the bishopric order, of the dark order of the priesthood, for the Roman order, inclusive of other members of secret societies and the bankers, etc., having a special meeting off Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia, and with the intention of transferring the government into the hands of the popes of Rome. And while it could not be done in one swift move, they set up a system by which it could be done incrementally, step by step, creep by creep, etc., by encroachments and methodologies of creating color of law systems and color of law, color of authority systems, and color of office entities, etc., and including the introduction into North America of what is known as dead pledges, which have been called mortgages, and thus the liens that are placed against them by virtue of all hypothecated properties of the Moorish Empire placed and hypothecated unto the bishopric of Rome under that secret treaty of Verona, etc. And essentially, without making things complicated, that is the foundation of the modern world's politics, and particularly with the poverty that our people are experiencing in these days to such extreme forces that they are, and to such extreme degrees that they are suffering, including the adjoining misinformation which was designed to accommodate the same. And so the establishment of color of law was a necessity to accompany the earlier established freedmen, closing of the Freedmen's Bureau, and the establishment of the 14th Amendment under 9 radical Republicans with the intent of bureaucratizing forced servitude and peonage, which they connotatively refer to as slavery. And so when the Prophet Noble said, I came to redeem you from mental slavery, which you have now, has much to do with the politics of the closing of the Freedmen's Bureau and the establishment of the 14th Amendment, creating the artificial person upon which the mystery of persons system was constructed to call the gray area by which people would be blinded as to what personage is, as to what persona is, and as to what is known as the masking of peoples and things and blending them into a bucket, creating the nom de guerre war machine that is used against the people today and also used to escheat all properties, all labor, all institutions, all non-profit corporate entities, etc., and later creating a 1040 contribution tribute form, which is to accommodate the tribute made to England with the breakup transfer made into the bishoprics of Rome. And so the 1040 form of the Inquisition operations is known as the 1040 form of the Internal Revenue Services as a tribute to England. And this is where they get their petition or their payments of the scales that they send to the bishoprics of Rome under the secret treaty of Verona. Also, all properties, etc., have been hypothecated and then delivered to the hands of the Roman Empire, i.e., the conditions that Noble Drew came to cure, and thus he came with a cure for the sin-sick world and brought us back some of the key information that comes down from our ancient mothers and fathers in order to redeem us from our sinful ways, which is the ignorance that we've been suffering from. And it is the duty of all Moorish Americans to study themselves, to go back to that state of mind of their ancient forefathers, to bring this information up, to put it in written form, i.e. the prophet said, in order to change the people, you must change their literature, and then take this stuff and information and the corrected concepts to the four corners of the world, to all nations, i.e. and take our places amongst the affairs of men. Statement being made because, as we were talking earlier, after a 100-year cycle, many of the Moors of America are not only unconscious of the true mission of the prophet, they have been influenced by many who have misrepresented the mission of the prophet, and they have run into complicated issues relative to many who have deliberately held certain information back, which has caused the Moors to be incompetent in their affairs. And so it's important that we touch on some things to correct those things, because no one can regain your lost estate but you, because you must demonstrate competence and understand both the politics and the reality of what's going on, and know the distinction between religion and dogma, the distinction between money and fiat, the distinction between de jure and de facto, the distinction between jurisprudence and fraud, prima facie, ordinances, etc. And these areas are where we've been most consistently injured, and these areas are areas that we really need to fix. We really need to fix them. So let's just talk, and let's talk about some things concerning us being Moorish American and this 100-year cycle, and some things that we can do to so-called bring a cure to some of this stuff. Islam, Moors, let's open up.
Islam.
Arise and give honor to Allah, and to His most holy and divine prophet, Noble Drew, and to all the wonderful works He brought unto us. And I give honor and respect to all the Moors around the country, all our land, to the north, to the center, and to the south, who have been true and loyal vanguards to the movement and to the cause set up by our prophet Noble Drew. I give honor and respect to those most succinctly who have been true to the cause and have been doing much work to aid in the uplifting of our people and of humanity at large, etc. Let's open the floor and let's talk. Some questions.
Questions? Anybody? Nobody? It's Taj, you guys not no questions?
Get in the mic so I can hear them and understand, because the voices are breaking up as it is.
With what?
Yeah, just on the...
Islam, Taj.
Islam.
Could you expand a little bit on the 1040 IRS form that you spoke of? And,
The 1040 IRS form is actually a tribute form that come under that agreement. Let's break down, let's make it very simple so everybody understands. The IRS, that people know as the Internal Revenue Service, is secretly a private for-profit religious extortion corporation belonging to the Popes of Rome under the Inquisition Revenue Services, hidden and veiled behind the secret Treaty of Verona between England and the Popes of Rome, and is a tribute to Rome under that treaty, and has nothing to do with taxes going to the legitimate United States Republic that is the creature of the Constitution for the United States, the American Constitution adopted for governing the United States of North America, including Canaanland that you call Canada, which has a corporate registration in the state of Delaware, etc., and they are partners. They just separate jurisdiction. That is called competition between each other, but they're actually one entity, and they're both subdivisional colonial operations of the Roman Empire by virtue of England, i.e. they are colonies. Colony corporations are doing business as what you would call surety holders, etc., and imposed trustees over the Moroccan Empire that includes North, Central, South America, and the adjoining islands. The 1040 form is an official form set up under some those members, etc., and particularly under Woodrow Wilson, Praetor for the order, as a tribute to England, and then England makes their payoff to the popes, and they get kickbacks, and that's the foundation of the wealth of the rulers operating under colored law in the Western Hemisphere, etc. That's their payoff for colonial operations, and it's designed to slow walk and drain the economy while putting nothing back in it, and they have no, what you would call, accounting to answer to, which means they are not audited, because it actually is a secret treaty of a war machine. So the 1040 form is an official treaty, tribute that is operative under that treaty to drain the economy. It does not go to schools, it does not go to food, it does not go to shelter, it does not go to maintaining the streets or anything. It is a totally extracted, extortionist extraction from the economies of the people to slowly put the republic into artificially constructed debt, and to make sure that the people themselves cannot economically come out from under the yoke of Rome, under the guise, artificial guise, that it is government. And it is not government, it is not a creature of the Constitution, and it is indeed a total fraud set up by the popes of Rome under their secret Treaty of Verona, and it is owned by them. And so that 1040 form has nothing to do with legitimate government. It is a tribute instrument.
Islam.
Islam.
Could you expound on the concept of an ipso jure subject or ipso jure Moorish subjects?
Ipso jure in law means as the law stands and as the law is. That's what ipso jure means. That means as it stands in the law, which means any kind of way that you look at law, ipso jure, it stands. So that means there is no necessity of supporting statutes or any ordinance or any other angle that one may look as support. That means it is absolute maximum. ipso jure in law. That's what it means. And so, relative to Moorish subjects, you're making probably reference to the expatriation and the citizenship of the United States, etc.
Correct.
Is it? All right. So it would be well if I simply go to the record so that everybody knows what we're talking about, so that that can be comprehended. And so you're talking about citizenship in the United States and expatriation, etc. So I'll go directly from the law so that people can hear, so they'll know what the question is rooted in, and also they'll understand the relationship of themselves relative to their obligations of showing proof that they're not Moorish. In other words, they would have to prove that they're not Moorish. Where a lot of people think that they got to prove that they're Moorish, actually the opposite is true. So I will go into the law. Excuse me, this is the law. Citizenship of the United States, expatriation, etc. And that's on page 459 for those who would do the research, etc. Chapter 5, temporary provisions, Morocco, American Legion, etc. Secretary of State, August the 3rd, 1906. Sirs, there are strictly speaking no Moroccan laws relating to citizenship of the Moorish subjects in Morocco. Now, the fundamental laws of this non-Christian country are based entirely upon the Islamic code, and no part of which treats of the subject of citizenship. Page 460, citizenship of the United States, expatriation, etc. There are, however, numerous treaties and conventions between the various Christian countries and the Moorish Empire, by means of which citizenship in this country is defined. As I understand from the above acknowledged instructions that it is not the desire of the department to call for a report upon such lines, I will therefore confine these remarks to general conditions existing, which may possibly be of some use in connection with the information desired. Number 1, citizenship in Morocco may be said to be governed by the laws pertaining to the same in other countries, with the exception that all persons residing in Morocco who cannot prove foreign citizenship or protection are considered ipso jure Moorish subjects. I'm going to repeat. 1, citizenship in Morocco may be said to be governed by the laws pertaining to the same in other countries, with the exception that all persons residing in Morocco who cannot prove foreign citizenship or protection are considered ipso jure as Moorish subjects. Number 2 and 3, Moorish subjects lost their nationality only by becoming naturalized in or protected by another country having treaty relations with the Moorish Empire. Are we clear?
Yeah, Brother Taj. Brother Taj.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Brother Andre. I got a question for you.
Yes.
If the courts do not recognize a person as a...
Slow down. First, we must establish whether a court is a court. But continue with the question, and then we're going to qualify. Go ahead, complete your question.
Yeah, if the courts does not recognize a person in their impropria persona, right? When and which court is it best for you to be operated in that type of persona?
All right, now, I just read you from the law. Now I'm going to go back to answer your question. I'm going to qualify. And this is so that many Moorish Americans and others who may find themselves in a situation of being abused by imposters, because we brought up the issue that there's 2 different jurisdictions going on here, and one of the things that we recognize is a lot of people don't know that. They don't even know when they're in a court. or when they're not, do they?
Correct.
Now, as soon as we say court, then it is established that we're assuming that we're in a court. Am I correct?
Correct.
So when you say a court doesn't recognize something, you just said it was a court, right?
Yeah. Well, when you look at the
Wait a
building.
minute, slow down. When you say that a court doesn't recognize something, that's a statement that implies that you've accepted that whoever you've been talking to is a court. So let's go to the law, and let's go to the military manual. Now, the President of the United States is the Commander-in-Chief of the order, is he not?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Commander-in-Chief wears two hats, doesn't he? Or what you call two crowns. He wears what you call a civilian and a military crown, doesn't he?
Correct.
And it's the only branch of government that crosses that bounds, are we correct?
Yes.
Called executive, am I correct?
Yes.
Now, is it a known fact to anyone in that room right now as we speak that President Obama went to Kudjo, which we, the people who don't know better, call Egypt, and he made a speech and exposed to the world that the United States Constitution is derived from Muslim law? Is that a fact?
Islam.
Yes.
Did he do that?
Yes, he did.
Did not at the same time where it is the tradition when the president and his wife leaves the country, they leave together and they are presented together? And isn't it a fact that when he went to Kudjo, his wife and first woman of the house triangulated and went to the Alhambra, Andalusia, Spain, was the last stronghold of the Moors before the overthrow of the Moorish Empire by the European bishoprics under the Pontifex action at Granada, Spain?
Yes, indeed.
Isn't it a fact that when they both came back from that journey, the first thing on the order of the president, from a position of political action, one of the first things he did was sign the rights of indigenous people?
Yes.
Yes, he did.
And Article 5 within that international law declares for these people to declare their nationality, that they have a right to their nationality?
Yes. I know.
All right.
Yeah.
Going to continue. Now, didn't at the same time, shortly, in these past year, as you've been having the CIA and other black box entities overthrowing governments in the East, that they had some unfortunate incidents where they started burning places that they called embassies and stuff like that, or attacking them that were under the U.S. corporate entities jurisdiction?
Yes.
Did not the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton start appealing to the rest of the world about these matters and talking about the uncivilized activities from that approach, etc.? And that when she made that speech from the Ben Franklin room, and by no non-accidental circumstance have 3 Moorish American flags behind her, Moorish flags, adjacent to the Stars and Stripes Amity flag that they've been called the U.S. flag.
Which Moorish flags were those?
That's the red flag with the 5-pointed green star.
Okay, I haven't seen that.
Well, she spoke from the Ben Franklin room here. And the Ben Franklin room, remember Ben Franklin was a minister plenipotentiary, which I'll read from the treaty in a moment, to put things in perspective. That's why it's important for people to know their history so they don't allow Europeans or any other Asiatics try to act like they don't know who you are, or that they're not obligated to acknowledge you. It's because they're operating at Morocco. That's why when you're looking at the law and they talk about the United States expatriation, etc., right underneath it, it has Morocco. Because the United States is the corporation doing business at Morocco, but the land is Morocco.
Right. And not really to get too far off track from what I was the question that I asked, right? I know you're a brother who's well knowledgeable. I can attest to that right now. I just wanted to know when is it the best court situation for you to operate in a proper persona?
I'm going to give you some keys. That's why I'm saying what I'm saying, because I understand the question, but I'm making sure that everybody has a background so that when I give you the information, etc., or the suggestion, that you be in your proper order while doing it.
Islam?
The Moorish Temple of America is really a regency. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Islam, Taj.
I'm going to read Act 1.
Islam, Taj.
Yes.
Can you hold on one sec? I'm just showing the flag behind Hillary Clinton, right? So that everybody knows. There's the flag.
You see that?
Right behind Hillary Clinton. So it's not like they don't know. Everybody knows.
Yeah, he's just showing it around the room.
Word. Let me see that. Let them know.
All right.
Thank you, Taj. Go ahead.
You're ready right now.
All right. Let me continue with another statement. After the president and his wife came back, do you notice that they come through the double doors with the guard on to the left of the president, standing due guard with the Moorish flag? You got that picture too?
No, I don't think so.
No.
What was that?
The other picture.
Make sure that they get the picture with the president and his wife coming through the doors with the due guard with the Moorish flag. He says he doesn't have that.
All right, I'll go up.
That will be sent to you. She's going to send it to you now. She's going upstairs to send it to you now.
Tell me, is that cultural educators?
The point,
Cultural educators?
Yes.
Yeah, or Kudjo's email.
Or tell it if she can.
go ahead.
Send it where?
Yeah, send it to
Yeah, send it to cultural educators.
At Gmail, right?
At Gmail, yeah.
All right, yes. Now you will see the president and his wife going through the door with the guard to his left, standing due guard with the American flag, which is the Al-Moroccan flag, which is the red flag with the 5-pointed green star, which is Morocco, the Moroccan Empire. You get the point? In other words, the signals are being sent. Unfortunately, the people are not picking up the signals because the leadership ain't teaching them. Because the leaderships who are paid off by the Europeans keep trying to keep them in the black state so that they're non-descendable. You see the problem that we have?
Yeah.
In other words, the signals are being sent. You, when I say you, I'm always talking plurally, need to start demonstrating competence. I'll be clear.
Islam.
As long as our people continue to demonstrate unsurety and incompetence, these Europeans in administrative venues that are pretending to be courts know that they don't even know they're in auction blocks. And they go on these auction blocks to start talking to these people like they're court.
Islam.
Rather than pulling to their obligations. You get the point?
Islam.
It's called a quo warranto. Make sure to write this down. Q-U-O, first word. Second word, W-A-N, just like warrant.
Yeah.
W-A-R-R-A-N, right? T-O, warranto. That is a sophisticated
Delegation of authority.
yes. Now, what you would command in it would be all charters, all licenses, all permits, all liability bonds, all surety bonds, all indemnity bonds, and all certifications by which every officer, starting with that person who's claiming to be a judge and the prosecutor, and every last one of those persons in that room or tribunal that claims to be a court, to present for the record that instrument that proves to be a creature of the Constitution that established them as a court, etc., under quo warranto, as a standard. But let me go again to the Divine Constitution and Bylaws, which I was going to read earlier. Divine Constitution and Bylaws of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, the Divine Constitution and Bylaws, Act 1. The Grand Sheikh and Chairman of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science is empowered to make law and enforce law with the assistance of the Prophet and the Grand Body of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science. And the Assistant Grand Sheikh is to assist the Grand Sheikh in all affairs if he lives according to the law, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. And it is known before the members of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science. So you can see that the Moorish Holy Temple of Science is actually a regency. Are we clear?
So that makes this a government.
It's exactly correct. Because you're supposed to have your own court. And then you make communications with them, and particularly when they're dealing with Moorish Americans, etc., and you bring them to their obligation, which is expressed in Article 3. Now I'm going to read Article 3 of the Constitution. Now keep in mind, that's why I put it in the treaty book, but keep in mind, in the heart of the divine and national movement, with the warning from the prophet for the nations, the heart of the movement, he says what? Help me in my mission to bring my people back into the constitutional fold of government, enforcing our Constitution of the United States of America. Therefore, it is known that that Constitution is a covenant between the Moroccan Empire and the Europeans doing business at Morocco. That's what that treaty, that ordinance of 1787 and the Constitution constitutes. Are we clear?
We're clear.
Therefore, you're supposed to, knowing yourself, call them to the table. But therefore, to call them to the table, one must be in one's proper person, because you're speaking to the highest office of the judicial powers, thus the Attorney General. And thus all actions in those tribunals, in order to be brought to the table under Article 3, must be Article 3 courts, mustn't they?
Yeah.
Or it's not court, is it not?
It's not.
Now, being that you are Moorish American, etc., the sovereign of the land, truthful matter is we don't even belong in them courts. Now, this is one of the strategies of why President Eisenhower shut down consular courts in the West at 1954, and this is when he was having all them so-called quote-unquote Negro preachers marching around, convincing them not to rock the boat. And as you know, later on, after they bumped off Kennedy in the early 60s, that they set up the 501c3 agreement with all them Negro preacher marching guys not to rock the boat. And they got this tax exempt system for their so-called religious organizations, etc., becoming actually creatures of the order of the democracy system set up to counter the republic for the controlling of the so-called persons who are branded Negro, black, and colored, who are really the heirs of the estate that makes them non-descendable with them brains. So let's read Article 3 and then Article 3, Section 2, so we can understand the diversity issue that should be brought to the table every time Moors deal with these people that are calling themselves courts.
Before you continue, what does non-descendable mean?
Non-descendable means if one is not in your proper person, you have no capacity to be descendable, which means you have no estate. And keep in mind that status and estate are equals in law. To make sure that no one isn't confused, I'm going to go to the law book and read status. So this is very important. Like let's go to 16 in the questionnaire with the prophet, no probably, and he says what? In 16 he says, how did the prophet begin to uplift the Moorish Americans? What is the answer?
Teaching them to be themselves.
All right. Then also in your divine constitution and bylaws, and particularly in the prophet's warning, divine warning by the prophet for the nations, what did he declare relative to Moors helping him in the mission? He says what? Bringing them back into the constitutional form of government, didn't he?
Right. Yes.
All right. And he said enforcing the Constitution, didn't he?
Islam.
And so, and he says, if you don't think, if those who doubt whether the prophet and my program is right for the uplifting of my people, go to those who know law. Didn't he say that?
Yes.
Yes.
So what happens when you go to those who know law and you ask them and you say to them, well, the prophet told us to be ourselves, and so that's why I got my free national name, and you're looking for them to recognize it. And when they see that you doubt it, or they see that you don't understand what you're doing, and they've been operating and stealing your birthright, they're logically not going to sit down and have this conversation with you, are they?
No.
Because the prophet's been here 100 years ago, and you should have had this stuff down by now, shouldn't you?
Yes.
Wow.
And so if they've been living off your virtues, what the prophet told you they were, didn't he?
Yes.
They're going to continue until you exercise this stuff correctly, aren't they?
Yes.
Islam.
So now let's look at status, and then I'm going to read Article 3 of the Constitution. Then I'm going to go into the military training manual, and then I'm going to go back to the Constitution and both show you what they all know, and then show you they're in breach of oath and in breach of their obligation, and you're not supposed to let them get away with that stuff. Are we clear?
Yes.
Islam.
Islam.
And that includes your so-called leader guys.
Islam ties. Could you also, as you speak on this, could you, where the opportunity arises, speak in terms of, as it relates to people born in the Caribbean or Mexico, etc.?
All right, we're going to go to that too.
Yeah.
See, and this is back to the prophet. That's why the prophet tailored that Circle 7 just for us. And our concepts are wrong. And this is why you see these Europeans here always talking about America as if it's a country, when it's in a state. You get the point?
Yes.
Islam.
Status. Status is the standing, the state, or the condition. It is the legal relation of an individual to the rest of the community. It is the rights, the duties, the capacities, and the incapacities which determine a person to a given class. It is a legal, personal relationship, not temporary in its nature, nor terminable at the mere will of the parties, with which third persons and the state are concerned. And while the term implies relation, it is not a mere relation. It also means estate. I repeat, it also means estate, because it signifies the conditions or circumstances in which one stands with regard to his property. Are we clear?
Islam.
Islam.
So when the prophet says, I am teaching you to be yourself, that means you must be in your proper person. If you go to someone who knows law and ask them and say, well, the prophet is teaching us to be ourselves, and from a law perspective, that would be called what? What?
Improper sound.
Somebody pick it up.
Impropria persona.
And what does impropriate persona mean?
Improper person.
In one's own
Self.
proper person.
Yes.
An impropriate persona means in one's own proper person. It is a rule that in pleas or in pleading that the pleas to the jurisdiction of the court must be pled in appropriate persona, because if pleaded by an attorney, they admit the jurisdiction. As an attorney is an officer of the court, and he is presumed to have pled after having obtained leave which admits the jurisdiction. Therefore, if you walk into one of those tribunals without your proper person, they already have jurisdiction, don't they?
Yes.
Islam.
Now, because there's an assumption. Now, if you have an attorney or hire an attorney, you've given him your birthright as he's an officer of court and he has leave. And in law, that constitutes really a bounty hunter with a tie that you just happen to hire. You see the point?
Yes.
And people think these people are representing them when they just delivered their birthright, you see, and their only obligation is to deliver you to that auction block that they're calling a court that you have not yet even qualified under quo warranto. You see what the problem is? Now the prophet set up the old Canaanite temple, the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, to bring cure to this matter, yet the law has not been carried out, and now the people are suffering those injuries because the law has not been carried out. Therefore, the law is going to have to be carried out in order to save the nation. Are we clear?
Yes.
Let's go to the law. Article 3, Section 1 and Section 2. The judicial power of the United States, and when you're talking about the United States, you're talking about Canaanland too. Don't let them trick you because they're operating under two different charters. They're both British colonies, are we clear?
Teach.
Islam.
The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The judges both of the Supreme and inferior courts shall hold their offices doing good behavior. They haven't been acting very nice, have they?
No.
Oh, all right. And shall at stated times receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office. Number 2, Section 2. The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States, and treaties made or which shall be made under their authority to all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and consuls, not counsel, consuls, to all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, to controversies to which the United States shall be a party, to controversies between two or more states, between a state and citizens of another state, between citizens of different states, between citizens of the same state claiming lands under grants of different states, and between a state or the citizens thereof and foreign states and citizens or subjects. In all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and consuls.
The prophet and what he laid down, which was another thing to let us know that they were legit. Because everything that they presented to us was from the perspective of this is what the prophet, not I'm the grand sheep, so you need to follow this or whatever. Everything was based on the prophet. So from early out, we had a clear perspective as to what the movement is, what it's about, what our job is, what our duty is as sheiks, as grand vanguards, muftis, etc. We knew from the jump, right? Another thing to put on the record, prior to that, in 2005, 2006, we brought Bobby Hemmett here, right? We used to do sessions at this place called the Marcus Garvey Center, right? When we brought Bobby Hemmett here, Bobby Hemmett said that Toronto is the pineal gland of consciousness in the Americas.
Wow.
It's Bobby Hemmett, right? Toronto is the pineal gland of consciousness in the Americas. You know Bobby Hemmett's master metaphysician, everybody knows who he is, so we'll put that on the record. And that was because when he came here and he sat in the position like where this brother is sitting, he couldn't, it was mind-blowing to him that there's all these people on this conscious level. Because where he comes from, down south, which is the base chakra, which he said that, I'm from Atlanta, that's the base chakra, and I needed to come to the pineal gland in order to do this lecture, right? He was making a metaphysical statement that everything's going back to, just like Noble Drew Ali said, everything's going back to before the European was in this land. As we see outside, it's 12 degrees outside, January, right? That's the prophet.
Yep.
That's, you know, it's, we're supposed to have the lecture last week. Right, we were supposed to have it last week. And we chose to cancel it. Not even knowing what's going on with the weather or nothing like that, we chose to cancel it. And then we come today and it's 12-degree weather outside. Right? That's definitely Prophet, Allah, and what the activity that we're doing. And just like Brother Taj said, when we say you, when we say we, we're talking about all of us. Because there's no, like Brother Tallahassee says, there's no big eyes or little U's. With regard to what we're dealing with. He's in Nova Scotia right now, doing the great missionary work in Nova Scotia, right? So we're gonna, without further ado,
yeah.
All right.
I'll just be really brief. Grand Chief Dawid L, this is also for you to hear too. You know I gotta get you. All right. So after Kudjo came back, they videotaped their whole episode, and when he came back, we sat in front of the screen and watched this for hours, right? This is what you see going on here comes from their example. He already mentioned it, but just to point out to you, Dawid, I don't know if you noticed, but even the small little things. And I want us here to know that the position that we're in is the same position that he gave to us, and that the position he was in when brothers went down there. What they did was, so for every single gesture that he made to us, or everything that he did, it sparked us up here. So imagine the amount of people that will come here. So let's take our responsibility. Let's take responsibility. Just as Grand Sheikh Dawid El did. He could have given a lecture. If you watch this, if you hear him speak, this is not a small speaker. This man is eloquent in his speech. It's his gift, and he's actually a master at it. And I just wanted y'all to know so that when you're speaking with him, or when you're asking questions and stuff like that, go in, because he will go deep with you. Right? So we have the DVD for sale on the side too as well. I recommend that you get it, so it gives you an idea of what we're manifesting here as well. I mean, the brothers are tight, right? And just to let you know, they stood up against a whole world of sleeping Moors. In all these temples, like they're strong in their faith for, you know, Noble Drew Ali, religious wise. But what these brothers did was say, no, we have to do civics as well. And but it's not just saying it, people were also saying it, but what these brothers did was they actually stood up and said, no, we're going to run the temple. The real temple.
Oh yeah, speaking about that also, these were the first Moors that we saw with their own plates. Traveling around.
Activity.
Right? Like that they have their own plates to the point where we were watching people with Illinois plates get pulled over. Right. And then we're in their conveyance with the Moorish plates passing by watching people get pulled over.
Right. So like what Grand Sheikh Taj just said, there's one step of proclaiming your nationality. But that's their talk. That's paperwork. But then there's declaring, which is living, being the example. And I wanna, if y'all can help me with a round of applause, show my appreciation, our appreciation, and respect for the work that you've been doing, brother. And if you may, the microphone is yours.
Son, first I rise giving honor and praise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sustainer of all the balanced universes. Those illustrious Prophet Noble Drew Ali, who came in these days and times, teaching the Moors to be themselves. When the Moors had fell into the graves of Negro, Black, Colored, Ethiopian, African American, or any of the other names that the pale-skinned nations of Europe choose to place upon the Moors. For we know these are very simply misnomers, and that these are not the names or titles that belong to the Moors. Islam? To our flag, the Moorish flag. The red flag with a 5-pointed green star in the center, representing the 5 highest principles that are known to man. That is love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Our flag, the Moorish flag, has flown on these shores, Moors, not 10,000 years, but over 50,000 years. And what you have to understand about that is that flags don't come into existence without people who create them. So that means that there had to be people on the earth over 50,000 years who look like you and I, who are the aboriginal and indigenous persons, wherever we stand, who put that flag in the earth. Islam? To those of us who are in the Americas, we have this part of the Americas, we have the trade and amity banner up, and it's only a divine reminder to the Moors that the European nations owe the Moors and they owe us in compound interest.
The issue is that for a long time, you know, I don't want to jump ahead of myself. As well, I want to acknowledge the forerunner, the forerunner of our prophet, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who was John the Baptist, who was crying out in the wilderness. And then, last but not the least, I'd like to acknowledge our prophet, Noble Drali, who came strong for us. I mean, this is a man whose vision is still being unfolded. When he came, he said he came to deliver the divine plan of the ages, and that hasn't changed. So I want to acknowledge them. But as well, today is a special day as well, because I don't know if you Moors are familiar with the Orisha, but there's an Orisha called Ogun.
Yes.
And we had the opportunity to have Ogun live amongst us. And his name was Dr. Khalid Muhammad. And today is actually the anniversary of his birth. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge Dr. Khalid Muhammad for his great work, for the uplifting of fallen humanity, and for teaching our people who we really are. You know, a very, very, very powerful brother, man. If there ever was an Ogun incarnate, he spoke volumes to representing who Ogun is. To the Moors in Canada, starting with the Grand Sheikh Kudjo, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for. I mean, he's my brother and friend, and I mean, there's not enough that I can say about him or the work that he's done in Canaanland. And it would be, you know, insane for me not to acknowledge that we've done something that the Prophet Noble Drali began but didn't finish in his time. He actually took some trips to Canada. Now, I think part of the article should be in the museum. And he met with a doctor there in Canada with the emphasis on actually starting a Moorish Science Temple of America in Canada. Because right before that, he'd already went to Cuba and he went to Mexico and set up Moorish Science Temple of America there. Just to begin to reknit the Moroccan Empire, the ancient Amexem Empire. One of my favorite poets, his name is Saul Williams, and he has a piece in it, and it goes something like this. Our relationship seemingly falling apart at the seams, but our grandparents were both seamstresses for a reason. So Noble Drali was the actual seamster. He was the actual person who took the thread and the needle and began to sew the things back together for the rebuilding of our empire. And that's exactly what we have. We're in the embryonic stage. And for a long time we've been talking about nation building, but what we have to understand, Moors, is that this is a protracted struggle. This is going to take time. It's going to take our children to be taught. That's why it's so important. A lot of times when we had classes and stuff like that, it'll be packed with elders, which is not a problem, you know, with the fathers and mothers, but the children weren't in the room, which is very important. The children have to actually be present in the room. Islam? Islam. That's the key to the kingdom, because without them, we won't be able to continue the continuity of what the Prophet Noble Drali brought us. You know, in the old Louis V, it talks about how old palm fronds only extend to a certain point, but the younger palm fronds extend beyond the older ones. So we have to make sure that, and even on our charter, it says to extend the learning, to go beyond where Noble Drali himself actually took the Moors. Y'all with me, Moors?
Islam.
Islam. So, as well, I want to, just acknowledge Dr. Khalid Muhammad. 100 years after the Prophet Noble Drali, wow. First too, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that I don't have a fez on. I'm actually traveling in Atlanta. I've been here, I was only coming here for like a weekend, and I've been here for 2 weeks working, so I apologize. But I mean, nation building is a tedious piece, so I apologize, and I actually ran off and left my fez, but I'm here, so I apologize for my attire, and now that I got that out of the way, let's get the ball rolling. Noble Drali 100 years later. Noble Drali was more than what meets the eye. He actually was a being who came with a multi-layered conversation, a multi-layered doctrine that we call that eternal gospel. And what that multi-layered doctrine looked like was as they say in the Masonic Lodge, you were divested of something. But what Noble Drali, and that means that they took something away from you. But Noble Drali came to reinvest us with something specific. The first tool that he gave us was a knowledge of who we are. If you look on the cover of the Circle 7, it says, know thyself. Know thyself and thy Father God Allah. So the first thing that has to be understood about what Noble Drew Ali was talking about is the theme of the Circle 7. And I borrowed this from the Jehovah's Witness. You know, they would ring my doorbell when I was a young man, and I would open up the door and we would start to talk. And they pressed it in until it became a part of every part, as the Circle 7 says, that the theme of the Bible was about the kingdom. That's what they say. Well, the theme of the Circle 7 is that Allah and man are one. After you got that down, then you understand your role on the earth. In the Quran of Muhammad, it says that he created man Khalifa fil Ardut, which means in Arabic, he created man as his ruler or successor on the earth. So that means that wherever we stand, we ought to be the rulers. A perfect example of how we were divested of something. The most powerful people in the world today who dictate to the world are the Arabs. But Noble Drew Ali taught us in the 102s that we are the original Arabians. If you understand how the creator of all the worlds does things, he puts things under the feet of his children so that they're provided for. Although there's conflicts all over the continent of Africa, there's also diamonds and platinum and gold and rhodium and all these precious elements that could actually eliminate any kind of poverty, you know? But as well, the great creator Allah put us in oil-rich parts of the planet as well, right? So all of that has to be understood, that we were provided for, but we were divested of our birthright and our nationality. And you have an imposter standing up to claim something that isn't his. So like the story of Yaqub talks about the supplanter, we were supplanted by someone. I mean, the Indians and the Pakistanis now take the position that they're the guardians of the holy city of Mecca, when we know that that's us. There was a book written in the 10th century by an Islamic scholar named Ibn al-Jahiz. And Ibn al-Jahiz talked about, and this is his language, he says that Muhammad himself was the son or the descendant of 10 dark lords. And he used a particular word in Arabic to describe what Muhammad looked like. Okay? He used the word aswad. And the interesting part about that is the Arab world would have us believe that Muhammad didn't look like us. You know? That, you know, he looked other than us. He looked like an East Indian or something. Not that I have a problem with East Indians. I just wanted to be clear about where we're standing was given to us for a specific purpose. And I'm showing what we were divested of and how to get back there. That's the 100 years after the Prophet, Noble Drew Ali. Y'all still with me?
Yeah. Islam.
Okay, I can't. Everything is pitch black, so I can't see anything. So, okay. So, because of that, we have to understand that we have to take steps first to get back to the nationality piece. Though we understand that we're the vice regents of Allah on the earth, that means that we rule the whole earth. You know, remember, if you go back to the letter that was written by George Washington in his conversation with Sultan Sidi, it talks about how they owe tribute to the Moors for allowing them to even come to the Americas. When the Americas were first established, it wasn't even called America first. It was called Virginia. Okay, let's get that clear. And it was just a little small place. What the Europeans did is when they were on the ships, they created these compacts. One of them was called the Mayflower Compact. And before they actually came to the shore, they created government and brought government on the shore. And that equals the Admiralty government of today. But what you have to understand about that is that though that may be so, we were already here. So if we were the Aboriginal indigenous person, and we ourselves have defined what a Moor is. Because again, the most powerful weapon in the hands of a man who will wield it or a woman who will wield it is not a gun or a knife or a machete or anything like that. The most powerful tool that we can have is the power of definition and what we define as reality for ourselves and our families. So we said that a Moor is an Aboriginal and indigenous person of North, South, and Central America and all of the adjoining islands. That means wherever we are. If we're in Canaanland, if we're in Eskimo proper, if we're in Puerto Rico, if we're in Trinidad, you know, if we're in Jamaica, you know, if we're in Barbados, is the land of the Moors. You follow me?
Yeah.
Okay. You gotta forgive me sometime. I'm trying to get a lot of stuff in. So my brain is moving faster, my mouth is moving faster than my brain is telling me what to say, so I apologize. But I'm gonna promise to get as much in as I can for the time that we have, okay? What's interesting about the relationship of Noble Drew and what he was doing, as he was sewing the things back together, there were Moors who were standing with him who had on fezzes who were unsewing and pulling the garment apart that he was sewing back together. And that's what Grand Sheikh Taj, who I want to acknowledge as well, one of our strong soldiers and fighters on the battlefield for the Prophet and his Moorish Divine and National Movement, is Taj Tariq Bey. As well as Lord Nature Hill Bey, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for. These two Grand Sheikhs, again, they're powerful brothers unto themselves, and they lit me on fire with truth and holy zeal. So I have to acknowledge them, okay? But one of the things that Noble Drew was doing, he was knitting it back up, but there were Moors who were attempting to undermine him at that time. Really similar to what was going on with Marcus Garvey during the time when Garvey was rolling. You have the establishment of the Boulay during that time, which is an organization that was designed to work against any progressive leadership that was melanated. So they wanted to get rid of anybody who actually, and they used W.E.B. Du Bois, unfortunately, to actually work against the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. But, which is really kind of insane, because at the end of Du Bois's life, he winds up adopting the ideals of Marcus Garvey. He actually expatriated himself from the Americas and went back to Africa and repatriated himself. So it kind of defeated the purpose. Somebody trying to say something?
No, you're good, you're good.
Okay, so it kind of defeated the purpose.
Hello?
But there were agent provocateurs who were in the movement who were attempting to, and still are, attempting to pull the movement apart from the inside.
Excuse me.
You know? Yes.
Isn't that the same as Martin Luther King and Malcolm X?
Really simple. Really similar. More. There were people who were working in between Brother Malcolm, El Haj, Malik al-Shabazz, and Martin Luther King to stop that meeting from happening, to actually unite those two minds. Those were two very, very powerful minds who had, at the time, had those two minds been put together, they would have been a very formidable opponent for the people who they were fighting against, i.e. the United States government at that time. Mm-hmm. You know, the U.S., mm-hmm. not the Republic. The Noble Drew talked about, the National Republic. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing. A lot of the Moors think that we're insane because we talk about, you know, America being this corporation and this fiction, but any nation that is insolvent and doesn't have gold and silver is a fiction. Most of the nations like that belong to the United Nations. And the United Nations exist for bankrupt nations. That's why Taiwan is not a part of the United Nations, because it's a gold-rich nation. I know I got off the subject a bit, but the movement between Malcolm and Martin and Garvey and even Noble Drew, because right at the point where Marcus Mosiah Garvey met the Prophet Noble Drew, they deported him right after that. So they didn't actually give them the opportunity to forge this cohesive alliance that will be strong enough to move our people from A to Z. Because what you got to understand about Marcus Garvey and the Prophet, the only distinction in the work of the two is that Garvey had everything, he laid everything out except for the nationality piece. Noble Drew brought the essential piece, the nationality piece. Noble Drew said, we are today what our ancient forefathers were yesterday, which is very important. Garvey actually was looking for something to call us. Garvey was actually looking for a religion or a tradition to bury us in. He wasn't sure if it was the Hebraic idea. He wasn't sure if it was an Islamic idea. So what he did was he kind of merged the two and had us work from that particular paradigm, which was brilliant, because you can have the best of both worlds. But before that relationship was really forged, they deported the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, you know? Perfect example. In the United States, there's something called UN resolution. No, I'm sorry. It's called I can't think of the number, but what it is a resolution, executive order, pardon me, during the Carter administration, President Carter. And it talked about the relationships, and this is their language, the relationships of the Africans in America and the Africans in Africa, and forging a wedge between those two so that the two never meet. So the game has always been the same. You know, that's why Noble Drew Ali came to begin to teach the Moors to be themselves. If we can just be ourselves, it'll make sense to us that we should unite with our brothers who have all of the resources that you can imagine. Imagine someone whose backyard is full of diamonds, but they don't have a way to extract the diamonds out of the earth. A very wise friend of mine told me about 10 or 15 years ago, and it's a very important book. If you don't have it in your library, you should have it in your library now. It's written by one of our great scholars. He's returned to the ancestors now. His name is Walter Rodney. Anybody familiar with him?
Yes.
He wrote a book called How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. He was from Martinique. They for some reason or another, they put a bomb under his car. I wonder why. He was having a conversation. He was having a conversation about why Europe was so involved in African affairs and why they're still involved today. It all boils down to three things. It all boils down to three things, Moors, and that's God, gold, oils, and diamonds. That's all it's ever been about for the European. And he'll kill you and eat you. He'll kill you and eat you for those three things. You know? So we have to actually think beyond where we are. There's so much for us to do. But the first order of the day, again, is nationality. If we can begin to think as a national people again, and an example of what people do when they have nationalistic thoughts is the state of Israel.
Yeah.
Say again?
Islam. Yes, Islam.
The state of Israel is something that was created in 1948. Amazingly, there was one nation that they needed more to actually bring it into existence. And that nation that voted on the side of Israel that brought it into existence is Liberia. When I found that fact out, that blew me away. I was like, for real?
Wow.
Why? You know? Liberia. And with that being said, they built a nation. First they had a government in exile called the World Zionist Congress. And it existed in exile, being headed by Theodore Herzl. Theodore Herzl, right? It actually didn't know where to go. There's a book written about it. You can download it off the internet. It's called Judenstaaten in German. It means the German state. Jewish state, pardon me. Judenstaaten. And what it talks about is that they didn't even know where to go. They considered Argentina. They considered
Nigeria and Uganda.
And they considered Israel as the last resort, believe it or not. So if this is really their indigenous homeland and they're claiming it based on the Tanakh, the Torah, why didn't they choose that first?
Right. Well,
Islam.
Not only is that an example of the how nations are built. I mean, they built it. It took them years to build it, man. It took them years to build it. I mean, lobbying, blowing up hotels, creating fake terrorism. I mean, doing all the things that was necessary to bring that state into existence. Another piece I'd like to recommend to the Moors, The Multitude, is written by the Honorable Marcus Mozart Garvey. It's a little blue and white book. It's about this big. It's called A Message to the People, A Course in African Philosophy. And what Marcus Mozart Garvey does is lays out clearer than I've ever seen outside of one of our great, the brother Amos Wilson's plan, or even Chancellor Williams' plan, is how, step by step, to put your plan in action. It's amazing to me that, because a lot of books are written and they are solution based, you know. But what we have to do is begin to take a little bit from all the wisdom of our elders who've come to make the vision of Noble Drew Ali come to fruition. Because again, on the chart it says extended learning. To take portions of what some of the others have said and done and put those together so we can move beyond 100 years.
Islam.
Islam. The actual Jewish state trains ambassadors. They have a 500-year out plan for the state of Israel from right now 500 years out. 500 years out. I mean, we gotta make moves. You know, like the young people. We gotta make some. You know, we're playing catch up. You know, we're actually playing catch up. But again, we have to understand that all these things are in divine order. That these things are, you know, preordained. But I'd like to borrow this from another one of our great leaders. This is a fixed fight. You know, and though it may look like we're going down, you know,
nice.
Bobby,
Yeah.
the uppercut.
Yeah.
You know, no question. See, the uppercut is nationality and birthrights. The uppercut is various Moorish leaders around the country who they believe aren't in conjunction with each other, who work in conjunction with each other for the greater good of the Moors wherever we are. So don't believe all the hype and you know, foolishness. There are enemies of the Prophet and enemies of our movement. But there are brothers who work tirelessly day and night to make sure that this movement keeps moving and doesn't become stagnant. That's very, very, very important. Again, I know I'm jumping a lot, but just bear with me. I teach kind of weird. The Roman Catholic Church has and always has been in the seat when it comes to being in opposition to the Moors. There was a papal bull, June 18th, 1452, that talked about something called the doctrine of discovery. Anybody familiar with that?
Yeah.
I can't hear you.
Islam.
The doctrine of discovery talks about wherever they go and find the Saracens or Muslims, they put it in parentheses, that they could vanquish them and take their lands because they were infidels. Okay? And this was issued by Pope Nicholas V. Now what's interesting about this, and they also used the same papal bull to do away with some of the other native peoples who were in the Americas. Right? They used the same exact papal bull. And these are the same people who there are pictures of blessing the guns of the German soldiers when they went into battle against, you know, I mean when they were throwing people in ovens. Okay, they got pictures of these guys, you know, Spiritu Santi over the machine guns. You know, so we have to understand that these are the same people again who've been at a war with the Moors since the time of Charlemagne, when the Europeans didn't even agree with each other. You had the Angles, the Saxons, the Franks, you know, all being Indo-Germanic, but didn't agree with each other. Then there was a man who came along named Charlemagne who said, you know what? If we don't do something to Saracens, they're going to take over Jerusalem. They're going to push us out. We're going to be slaves to these people. I don't agree with you, Anglo. I don't agree with you, Saxon. I don't agree with you, Frank. I don't agree. But what we can agree with is that we have a common enemy. Someone is attempting to kill us. So they forged a bond with each other and went in and destroyed the Moors everywhere that they could. And that has continued until this present day. There's still a silent war being waged against the Moors. You know, there's a way to Moors where you can start a war and it'll be bloody and violent. And then, according to one of our great scholars, Jacob Carruthers, it'll end in intellectual warfare, which is what we're going through now. It's no longer, you know, big scimitars or, you know, even an M16. Now we fight with our minds. Now we're in a battle called intellectual warfare. We have to be smarter than our enemies. Like in chess, you got to be 8 steps ahead of this guy. You know, if not, you're going to get checkmated. We got to be much wiser than we were then. Okay? Are there any questions?
No.
Not yet. Flowing. Keep
Not
flowing.
yet. Not yet.
Keep flowing.
Okay. So again, going back to this. So there's always been a relationship with them. And what you got to understand about them is the Vatican is only like two blocks. It's not even an acre. It dictates to the whole world. I mean, think about it. And then it's all men. It's like, you gotta really think about this, man. Like, has there ever been a time where women weren't? I mean, these men are ridiculous, man. Every man I know has come from the womb of a woman.
Islam.
Every man I know has an umbilical cord. Every man I know was connected to his mother at one time. From the start, if you have a conversation and there are no women involved, you got some trouble. You have already got yourself in the foot. Because there has to be that balance. That's very important. But those men in that city, that less than 2 blocks, dictate to the whole world, man. The whole entire world. And they have a relationship. It's so interesting that when you start talking about sovereignty and what sovereignty is or what it isn't, I'll put it very simply, that the opposite of sovereignty is slavery. There's no opposite to it. Like people are talking about, well, you know, sovereignty, no, that's that European patriot stuff. No, sovereignty is free stuff. And anybody who speaks against sovereignty is either a slave or a slaver. There's no other choice. It's sovereignty or slavery, you choose one. There's no other choice. So when Noble Ali came, that was the whole purpose. He came to establish a relationship that was really similar to what the Freedmen's Bureau had. It actually was like the continuation of the Freedmen's Bureau to give the Moors back their stuff. Okay, questions?
Yo, touch on the Freedmen's Bureau. Adiza.
Ask him.
Say.
Yo, Dawid, could you touch on the Freedmen's Bureau and how it's relative to the Moorish movement?
Whoever that is, come closer to the microphone or computer or something.
Yeah, could you touch on the Freedmen's Bureau and its connection to the Moorish movement?
Yes. What the Freedmen's Bureau is, it was an agency that was designed to deal with, quote unquote, what they refer to as free blacks during that time who were around. An example of them would be John Jones, a man who actually was what they considered a free black man who had his own manumissions papers that actually was a way to, it was a record, it was a filing, somewhere where they can go and access records that talked about who was a slave and who wasn't. Perfect example of why this is important. There was a distinction that had to be made amongst the people in South Carolina. The Moors there were called the Sundry Free Moors. Anybody familiar with them?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Right. The Sundry Free Moors were a group of Moors who fought in South Carolina to distinguish themselves from the Negroes, that they were not Negroes, that they weren't Negroes, they weren't black and they weren't colored, that they were subjects of the Emperor of Morocco, and was able to enjoy a certain life and status after putting their status on the record, which is why the Freedmen's Bureau was so important. But after that ended, the registry actually ended, Noble Ali was the one who picked it up and started the Moorish Temple of America, but at that time it was called the Old Canaanite Temple. It served the same purpose. It served the same exact purpose, a place for us to put on record and proclaim, like it says in Act 6 of our Divine Constitution and Bylaws. With us, all members must proclaim our nationality. We are teaching our people their nationality and their divine creed. They may know they are part and parcel of this said government. And know they are not Negroes, colored folks, black people, Ethiopians, because these names were given to slaves. Excuse me, these names were given by slaveholders. So actually, Noble Ali was saying that we weren't really slaves, that they called us slaves. These names were given to us. They weren't our names. That's why I'll preface whatever I say with these are misnomer names. These names were given to a free people. You know, they saw us, and there are records in the Americas of them seeing us with our noble fezzes and our sashes on, and the European men knocking our fezzes off our heads and taking our sashes, and even at times taking us into servitude, the Moors. You know, so all of that has to be acknowledged. But Noble Drew Ali, the Moorish Temple of America, the divine national movement, and the Canaanite Temple was designed to be that Freedmen's Bureau after the Freedmen's Bureau ended. Here's the key to the kingdom. In Chicago here, Noble Drew Ali was the first person to elect an Asiatic person, who they erroneously refer to as black people, to a seat in Congress. His name was Oscar the Priest. But Noble Drew Ali during that time had 3 temples here in Chicago. Each one of them had about 3,000 members in it. So he had a serious constituency. He had the power to elect aldermen and Congress people. He had that much pull and authority in the city of Chicago at that time. Not only was that what was going on, he elected an alderman named Lewis B. Anderson as well during that time. Noble Drew Ali, upon having Oscar the Priest elected, had an agreement with Oscar the Priest that he would put a bill before the floor in D.C. that talked about the actual outlawing the titles Negro, Black, and Colored, which would have been a power move for the Moors. After Noble Drew Ali passed, he changed the form. There was a letter sent from the Supreme Grand Sheikh Emilio, who was the successor of the Prophet, who talked to Oscar the Priest, and in the letter it says, and I quote, "You agreed with the Prophet Noble Drew Ali before being elected that you would carry out these requests of his. After being elected, you no longer fulfilled your obligation to the Prophet." That is a very, very important historical fact that needs to be put on the record. That has to be on our lips. People need to know about that. Yes, Mom? Islam.
Could you talk a little bit in dealing with trust law and how it works in conjunction with the temple and the people within the temple, how we can use our temple as in regards to a trust instead of because the license that we carry is a form of a trust, but it puts you into a European jurisdiction, and by turning to our temple, we can use it and put into our own authority and our own jurisdiction. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes. First off, the conversation about trust is a dual conversation. Number one, the instrument that the Prophet Noble Drew Ali set the Moorish Temple up in is similar to a trust. It, in its legal definition, would be considered a corporation sole, S-O-L-E. Okay? A corporation sole is a structure really similar to, or is what the Queen of England operates with. Okay? That's actually how she holds property. It's how she holds things. She holds it in a corporation sole. As well, the Catholic Church holds things in a corporation sole. Though it may be titled trust, it's called a corporation sole. When the Catholic Church first came to America, it established something called an ultra-sovereign canon trust. Okay? Y'all with me?
Yep.
Okay. It established something called an ultra-sovereign canon trust. It issued out something called blue sky charters, which means that wherever the Catholic Church goes under the blue sky, it was covered by this particular trust that it created. Well, likewise, the Moorish, I'm sorry?
No, continue.
Likewise, the Moorish Temple of America is encapsulated in a trust too that was established by Noble Drew Ali. And it talks about it in detail, where he said he came to give us our tie to our vast estate, which was the beginning of a conversation. Mm-hmm. But it's a twofold conversation. The one conversation deals with us as a collective, but the other one deals with us as individuals. Because what we know is that they took us and created this legal fiction outside of who we are. Though we are flesh and blood living and sentient beings, they created this, in legal definition, stramanius homo, this fictitious trust, right? In actuality, we can never control it because we aren't the creators of it.